So that's 2 cities attacked and 2 cities razed to the ground. Jericho is now a pile of bricks and Ai is a blazing bonfire. And understandably, the rest of the kings of Canaan are getting nervous. Chapter 9 verse 1. Now, when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, and then a great big list of all the various kings involved, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. However, the people of Gibeon, they have a different plan from the rest of the Canaanites. They won't try and destroy Israel, they'll try and deceive Israel. Their plan is alarmingly effective. From verse 3, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. Different translations would perhaps put it differently. Some say that they were crafty or wily or cunning. But you get the point, don't you? This is manipulative and deceptive, but is undeniably effective. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and mouldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." Now, the fact that they should make it all the way into Gilgal is evidence that they posed no threat, or at least they appeared to offer no threat. This is like a wolf in sheep's clothing who has now made it into the sheep pen. And here's what they say to Joshua. "We've come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." Now, you might remember that God has already pronounced judgment upon all the Canaanites. Israel is simply to act as his sword, a tool in his hand for bringing about this judgment that they do deserve. Israel doesn't have to make decisions. In fact, they are not permitted to make decisions about what to do with the Canaanites here. However, God has said that non-Canaanite people can be offered a peace treaty. To be clear then, these Gibeonites are Canaanite people, but they are claiming that they are eligible not for war, but for peace. Now, why on earth would Joshua go along with this? Well, obviously there are 2 sides to the coin. There is a false pretense, but there's also a failure from Joshua to pray. Without doubt, Joshua should have sought the Lord here, but he didn't. And at least to the naked eye, it looked like everything lined up. It looked like they did come from a long way away. I mean, you've seen their supplies. You've seen the clothes they wear and the food that they carry. It all adds up. We don't need to make declarations of war against people who live so far away. So yes, by all means, have our assurances you're in no danger from us. As these Gibeonite infiltrators tell their story, you can see that they've thought this through the whole way. We were told at the beginning of the chapter that what prompted this exercise in deception was that they had heard what had happened to Jericho and Ai. And so what do they say in verse 9? "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God, for we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon and Og." Now, all of those events happened a considerable time ago. So do you see that they are pretending not to know about the latest information about what's been happening in that region? They're pretending that all they know of the Israelites is effectively what happened in Egypt and then a few of their battles since. That must be because they live so far away. How could the news of the fall of Jericho and Ai have reached the Gibeonites from all the way over here? However, the story seems to hold up, and so the Gibeonites spin this great big backstory about how the bread was fresh when they left home and how their clothes have been worn out by the very long journey. And then notice in verse 14, the Israelites sampled their provisions. So they're not foolish enough just to swallow the lie without doing any due diligence. They checked, but their check was to sample the provisions and not to pray. This is exactly what it looks like to walk by sight and not by faith. If God has clearly spoken and we know what he has said, it is our simple duty to submit ourselves to his authority and to walk by faith rather than by sight. To give some controversial applications, how many days did it take God to create the world? Well, I think the Bible says 6 days. And you might say, well, hang on a minute. There is this narrative and it passes my logic test. Well, fine, but your logic test is not your Lord, is it? God has spoken about his design for marriage, for example, between one man and one woman for life. But hang on a minute, this person might say. I can't see any problem with 2 consenting adults and so on. For me, that passes the logic test, they might say. Well, fine, but your logic is not your Lord. The Bible says that the role of elder in the church is for men who are biblically qualified and called to that role. Youch, controversial, hey? Well, there's plenty to think about from that chapter. Where God has spoken clearly and we know what he has said, may we make it our joyful duty to simply live in obedience to him.